Like the majority of readers, I started out being a big fan of the show. I rewatched a lot of the scenes of the show and had a lot of the iconic scenes and memes seared in my memory. And just like nearly everyone else, I found the last two seasons to be really lacking. The ending sucked and didn't make sense from a storytelling or character development perspective. For me, the majority of the characters had less than satisfying endings. These include Daenerys Targaryen, Jon Snow, Tyrion Lannister, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, the Hound, and many more. They just didn't have a real sense of closure despite having really great character development. I think most fans have the exact same problem and feel the same way. So, in order to fill all these gaps, I decided to read all the books. The chief benefit you get from reading the books is that you get a lot of details of the characters that didn't make it into the show. To the show's credit, a lot of the characters were extremely well acted and book accurate. This is because the actors of the show were very meticulously casted with the help of George R. R. Martin himself, which is pretty unusual and in stark contrast with what happened with The Witcher and The Rings of Power. A benefit of watching the show first is that when you read the books, you can imagine the actors of the show speaking, which really elevates the experience. The actors in the show were casted better than how our minds can imagine through reading alone. You can see their facial expressions, the visuals, the costumes, and the settings. The emotional communication. So for the most part, what we experienced through watching the show exceeded our ability to visualize it through the words in the books alone. The first book, Game of Thrones, was published in 1996. It is organized as memories from the point of view of many different characters. They are involved in several different plot lines. These include the noble houses of Westeros, the Wall in the Frozen North, and the Targaryen Princess Daenerys. George R. R. Martin's storytelling in Game of Thrones can be considered moderate in pacing. It's balanced and it doesn't become as slow as it was in Feast for Crows. The pacing is used wisely as it focuses intensely on details and world building. It also has a profoundly addictive page-turning quality due to its brilliantly conceived characters and scenarios. So how did George R. R. Martin accomplish something like Game of Thrones? He spent years as a TV staff writer, vast experience writing compelling and efficient scenes. But it's also obvious to me that a vast amount of research and studying of medieval history, mythology, and fantasy was necessary in order to make such creativity possible. George R. R. Martin also researched on how to write children, and he's on record saying that it was one of his biggest challenges. I think he made it, as the quality of the writing for the child characters like Sansa Stark, Joffrey Baratheon, and Arya Stark were on point. There are also tons of intense and powerful situations in the book, with most of them reappearing on screen as iconic scenes in the first 4 seasons of the show. Due to its high quality, aspiring writers can use Game of Thrones as a useful reference on how to write and use a large number of diverse and interesting characters, and how to create a truly compelling and alive fantasy world. I personally rate it a 6 out of 5 star book as it is uniquely brilliant. A Game of Thrones is followed by the second book, A Clash of Kings. It follows where the first book left off and maintains its high quality. Clash of Kings expands the stories of the original cast of main characters, and introduces a second equally interesting crop of new characters as the War of the Five Kings takes place. This conflict is one of the most memorable parts of the show. Most of the key characters are similar to the actors in the show, but a few like Jorah Mormont have personality differences. The plot of Clash for Kings maintains a slow and highly detailed pace, which deliberately allows the reader to visualize what happens in a very detailed and clear way. It is very absorbing and you lose track of time while reading. George R. R. Martin continues to demonstrate his genius, and it's evident that he did massive research to create this world and write these characters. The characters were also profoundly sympathetic, and you could really feel for them in the story. For me, there were 5 best character arcs. The first is Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys' story as the rise of the female Alexander the Great is so interesting and well written that it could have been its own series. The second great character is Tyrion Lannister. George R. R. Martin is on record for saying that Tyrion is his favorite creation out of them all. It is quite obvious from reading the books that Tyrion gets special attention throughout and was written to be very dynamic. Tyrion is presented as being very clever and having great situational awareness and wit. The third is Arya Stark. Her struggle to stay alive while being surrounded by misery and barrenness is one of the best I've ever seen. The fourth is Catelyn Stark. She has a mother's problems as her son takes big responsibilities at such a young age. And the last is Theon Greyjoy. Theon's mistakes and emotional issues are highly relatable to young men. The majority in Clash of Kings, the book ends with them either at the beginning or in the middle of their character arcs, and with a series of cliffhangers. I rate this book a 6 out of 5 stars. Thanks so much for watching. Please help out this channel by liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. And check out the playlists. Comment below on what you think about Game of Thrones and George R. R. Martin.